And welcome to No Story Stagnates with me, Ernie Boxall. And it is my real pleasure to introduce from the United States of America, Nigel Clayton. Nigel, can you tell everyone who you are, where you are, and what you do? And also, we may be going to where you were born.
My name is Nigel Clayton, and I live in Denver, Colorado. And today it's totally overcast. It reminds me of England, except it's going to snow.
Right.
And I was born in England.
We'll come into that, Nigel, as we go on. But first of all, the question I ask all of my interviewees, do you know how your mother and father met?
No, I don't, because I don't really have any information of my real father. I know his name.
Yes.
I know I've got a little picture like this of him standing with 4 other people, so you can imagine how small it is.
Yeah.
And it's the only picture I've ever seen of him. And he was in banking.
Right.
They got divorced when I was 5, and then my mother married an American Air Force guy stationed in England.
Yeah.
And they met because she was at the time a cigarette girl at the pictures in England.
Right. I'd like to go on to that second story for Nigel, but first, from that little picture you got of your father, what impression did you get from it?
Well, the only thing my mother told me about him was that he was in banking and that I looked a lot like him.
Right.
I thought he was a handsome looking guy.
Of course. And now, so we go on to how your mother and father met. Cigarette girl in an American base. What was?
Now this was in an English town, my hometown.
Yes, that was. And can you tell me a little bit about what you remember about that base?
Well, I was in my hometown until I was 7.
Yeah.
Which is Kettering, Northamptonshire.
Yes.
And what I remember about that is I was in the English school system until I was 7. And it was like Harry Potter without the magic.
Right.
There were people with very long black robes, and they had the big long canes, and they'd whack you on the knuckles, and
yeah,
you didn't say boo. I mean, you did exactly what you were told.
Right.
And everybody knew it.
Yeah.
So those are my biggest things that I remember. But the biggest thing that sticks out to me was one day I went to school, and I grew up with a lot of Nigels. There were a lot of Nigels when I grew up. And the teacher said, Nigel Clayton. And so I looked around to see who Nigel Clayton was. And nobody said anything. And the teacher called the name a couple of times. And then he finally said, that's you. And he pointed at me. And I said, no, I'm Nigel Skipton.
Right.
He said, no, you're Nigel Clayton. And being in the English school system and you didn't say boo, I stopped at that point.
Yes.
And I went home and I went to my mother and I said, they told me my name was Nigel Clayton today in school. And she said, it is. And I said, but wasn't it Nigel Clayton yesterday? And she said, no. And for the longest time, I thought, wow, that is really weird. I mean, Skipton, Clayton, they're really close, but I know it was Skipton.
Yeah.
So going forward, when I was 15, he died, my American father. And that's when my mother said, your real father was named Skipton. I'm going, I knew I wasn't crazy.
It took a hell of a time to tell you, though. Yeah. Interesting story.
Yeah, she didn't know how to tell me.
No. And I guess that might be a lesson for parents out there, Nigel. Would you agree?
Yeah, because it was very uncomfortable for me. You
Yeah.
know, like, how did I get that so wrong?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. No, that is a valuable lesson. Um, my second question to all of my interviewees is to give me a story between 1 and 10, good or bad, that made such an impression that you remember it and the lesson. Now, if you have another story between the ages of 1 and 10, let's have that one. But if that's the big lesson you learned, then we can move on.
Well, that's pretty much the biggest lesson. But at 7, I was taken from, Kettering,
Yeah.
where when I was growing up, the average summer temperature was 65 degrees. It was always raining,
Yeah.
but it was always green. And I was taken to southern New Mexico in July, where it was 110, no rain, and nothing was green. It couldn't have been the more opposite than where I
Yes.
lived in England. And there were some strange things, like it was 110 degrees. England doesn't get 110 degrees. So I'd never felt heat like that.
Right.
And what was interesting was when we got our house on base, I walked around the house and I went to my mother and I said, there's no fireplace in the house.
Right.
In the winter, we're going to
Yes.
freeze to death.
Yeah.
Because I'd never experienced central heating. So, and there was all kinds of other things. It was a very different world
Yes.
from England at the time.
Now, there's a question that came straight to my mind when you said that, Nigel. In that, the first week or 2 weeks that you were in the house, the new house, did you go outside much? Or was it it wasn't too hot for that?
Well, I mean, I was 7, at 7 years old, you kind of adapt to things very quickly.
Okay.
And if all the other kids are doing it, you figure, well, it must be okay,
Right.
But it was just such a shock, when we got off the plane and it was like, whoa, what is that heat?
Did you have to change? Did you have to wear hats?
We didn't wear hats. We didn't wear sunscreen.
Wow.
We didn't have sunglasses. It was just, here's your tennis shoes, go out and play.
Right. Interesting. Good. And so, Nigel, next question. I find teenage years really important. So I'm going to ask you for a story between 11 and 15 and a lesson, and then 16 to 20. A story between 11 and 15, which again made a real impression on you.
Well, I stayed in New Mexico on Air Force Base for 4 years.
Yeah.
Then I came back to England at 11 years old.
Right.
And when I came back, it was December of 1963.
Right.
And I soon, even the first day, was introduced to the fact that the Beatles were had totally taken over England.
Yes.
In America, we hadn't even heard of them yet.
No.
Even though 2 months later, they were on the Ed Sullivan Show and they were seen all over the world. But it was amazing to me because I lived, 75 miles northwest of London, 40,000 population, and there was Beatles stuff everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And the songs were, and then I was bused to the American Air Force Base School and we'd sing the songs on the way on the bus and everything. But I remember it being a very happy time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of positiveness. There was a lot of, we can do things.
Very.
It felt very, very powerful. And not only were there all the bands that were there, you know, because I lived there from 63 to 67, then I came back to America again.
Yeah.
But it was not only all the music, but the fashion, and
Yes.
just so much change so fast. But it was so positive. I mean, everybody of any age embraced all of that. You know, the old age pensioners were embracing the Beatles just as much as the teenagers were. Because I think it was the first time in probably the 20th century that money was coming into England.
Yes.
And so there was prosperity like never before. It wasn't the same as when I left.
No, no.
And over those 4 years, it changed so much. So it was really, really an interesting time. And that what was also interesting to me is the kids that I hung out with on the weekends thought I was American, and the kids I went to school with during the week thought I was English. So that was kind of like being an outsider in two different cultures at the same time.
Absolutely, yes.
But we loved being on the Air Force Base because we were on an Air Force base that was closed down except for the elementary school and the junior high. And we were right in the middle of the base, but a mile apart. So it was a very small community, and we all had one thing in common. You know, one of our parents were in the American Air Force.
Yes.
But we got to do really fun things, like my 8th grade English teacher had us read Shakespeare, and we read Hamlet, and then we went to Stratford upon Avon and saw the Royal Shakespeare Company do Hamlet. And that was like, wow, you know. We went to all the different, you know, sightseeing places. We went to George Washington's ancestral home, and all of that. So it was a very interesting time in a lot of ways for me as a teenager from 11 to 15.
With that, Nigel, I know that I went to America in 68 for the first time. And I was taken to a softball game. And there was a basketball lying around. So I started to juggle with it. And people were amazed because football hadn't really taken off. So as you went onto the American base, perhaps they didn't play football? How did you adjust to the sporting aspect of it there?
Well, we did. We did play football or soccer. And we would play English schools.
Right.
And we might as well have not shown up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because it wasn't something that any of the coaches really knew how to train us about. And it wasn't whether or not the other team was going to win. It was like, how many goals are they going to win by?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of it was an interesting thing that we had to do. But then we'd play basketball. Yeah. And we'd do really well in basketball.
That's right. And knowing the American psyche, I just wondered how being beaten affected the team, the American lads.
Well, I think all of us felt like we're in another country. Yeah. This is something they do. You know, we got better at it as the year went on, but I don't think we really had, you know, negative emotional thoughts about it. It was just, this is where we are, you know, just like, and if you were an Air Force kid, you typically you lived in one place for 3 or 4 years, and then you went to a completely different country or whatever. So you were used to all of this kind of change. So,
so 16 to 20, Nigel, a story and a lesson.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, I left England in 67. I was 16, I was 15, almost 16.
Yeah.
And my father got stationed to Illinois, but we only lived there for a week.
Right.
Because he got diagnosed with leukemia. And so we went to San Antonio, where the Air Force has a big hospital.
Uh-huh.
And since I was in England for 4 years, I still had a little bit of an English accent.
Yeah.
To people in England, I didn't have an English accent at all.
No.
But to girls that were in 9th grade, that mostly were Texans,
Yes.
they loved it. And I, before that time, was totally invisible to girls.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I wasn't. And they would say, "You talk so cute." And I had girlfriends coming out of the woodwork.
Right.
But I'd never had a girlfriend before. And at one time, I had 3 girlfriends at the same time, until I was sitting at the top of a bleacher watching a baseball game. And one came up this side, one came up this side, one came up the middle, and they got within 10 feet of each other, and they all looked at each other, and they looked at me and gave me a dirty look, and they walked away, and I didn't have any girlfriends.
What a reputation, though, Nigel.
But what was great about it, it was because it was the time of the Monkees TV show. I don't know if you had that over there. So
absolutely.
And I'm no giant, so I'm sure they compared me to Davy Jones. So I was just at the right place at the right time, and
absolutely,
it worked out great, because typically, if the girls liked you, like at that age, the big guys would beat you up.
Right.
The big guys on the campus were on the same bus that I took to go to the school, and we became friends.
Sure.
So it was like one of the best years of my entire life.
Yeah, like Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, everything went great. But then he got a remission, and he wanted to go to Los Angeles, where he grew up.
Yeah.
So we moved to Los Angeles, and I went from heaven to hell.
Right.
I mean, the girls didn't like me. The guys didn't like me. It was dangerous. People were getting stabbed after football games. It was polluted.
Yes.
It was crowded. And there was nothing about it. I just felt very scared and vulnerable. And we lived there for a year, and then he died, and then we moved to Tucson, Arizona.
Right. And
it was very small compared to Los Angeles. It was clean. It was safe. That's where I went to my last 2 years of high school.
Right.
And then I went to the University of Arizona there.
I'm glad we've come to that, Nigel, because as you was talking, the question came to me during those years from really 5, 6, 7 up to 19, 18, 19, 20. How did you approach school? Did you enjoy school? What were you good at?
Well, I went to 5 different high schools in 2 different countries, and 4 different states. And the last 2 years were at the same high school. So high school was like a constant change. And at that time in America, nobody had really heard the name Nigel.
Right.
So I would get introduced, like when we went to Illinois and then we went to Texas, I was in the middle of, they had already started their semester. So the teachers would introduce me in the front of the class, and I heard every mispronunciation of Nigel ever made. Yeah. And most of the time, the kids would laugh. Yeah. Yeah. So it made me very much aware. I mean, I think it heightened my awareness of what was going on with people. Yeah. And like, I really got into understanding what was going on with people and why were they doing this and why were they doing this, instead of just being in the same place with the same people and maybe having the same friends and stuff.
Yeah.
None of that happened to me. So one thing that came out was the subject I did best in was math.
Right.
I didn't do very well in science because moving around,
Yeah.
you know, you had to be in class and then you had to go and do a lab. It was so time consuming, but math wasn't. I really liked history. I liked learning about people.
Yes.
So that was the biggest thing that came out of it.
Right. Was there a teacher who made a great impression on you and one who perhaps soured you a little bit?
Well, I did
throughout
have
those years.
Yeah, I did have this one teacher when I went to Texas. For some reason, she didn't like me.
Right.
And she put me right in front of her desk. And I hated sitting right in front of the desk. And I realized later on, I'm a big picture person. So I liked sitting in the back where I could see everything and what was going on.
Interesting.
And then the front, I couldn't see anything. And this was a math class, and she knew that where I had come from, we were chapters behind. We were using the same book, but we were chapters behind. And so she would ask me questions about the current chapters,
right,
knowing I probably hadn't even gotten to that chapter,
right,
and made me feel uncomfortable. So I went home after that first incident. I read all the chapters, I did all stuff. And the next day, when she asked me a question, I was able to answer it. And it's like, I know how to deal with you. So that was, but I'd never been put in front of a teacher before.
No.
When I was in England, the English teacher that took us to Stratford, and then she took us to London to see Henry V. She was a really, I think, innovative, way ahead of her time type person.
Yeah.
She was the first person that I think made everybody in the class feel comfortable and confident about being themselves,
right,
totally being themselves without any judgment or criticism or anybody in the class ridiculing them, because she was just like that. I mean, she was just very supportive, very positive. And that was something that I had never experienced, especially not in the English school system. But that still stuck with me. She was the sister of a national baseball player, a very famous one here.
Right.
And she kept saying, "My brother's in baseball," and stuff. But she was a wonderful person. I tried to get a hold of her in the last 10 years, and I haven't been able to.
No. And up to 20 then, Nigel, you've gone through high school. At 20, were you still learning? Were you still in education, or had you left by then?
No, well, I was never the kind of person that knew what I was going to be when I grow up.
No.
I mean, so many people, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be this. And I never even thought about it. And I was in my senior year of high school, and I still hadn't thought about it.
What age is that, Nigel, for the English people, senior high school? What age were you?
17,
right.
18 okay. When you graduate.
Yeah.
And most of my friends were going to go to college. And I thought, well, I guess I could go to college. And most of them were going into engineering or law. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go into law and I'll work for an American company that's situated in England. I'll make more money than the companies in England. I can wear one of the white wigs and I can have fun in Europe. Yeah. And that was the whole planning I put together to go to college. And so I went into college. and I took pre-law. I took a lot of political science, which I loved. I just really, I loved the way it gave you a big picture of every country that we studied, you know, what was it, what were their imports, what were their exports, et cetera. And so it gave me a really big picture. But I kept meeting all these bartenders that had gone to law school and couldn't get a job. And I thought,
Right.
man, that's a lot of work to be a bartender, and I don't want to be a bartender.
No.
Well, nobody told me it was a bad economic time and people weren't getting jobs. I did not get the memo at all. So after my first year in college, I got in a motorcycle accident, broke my back, and I couldn't walk to my classes at the university. So I went to a junior college for a year, and I really got into philosophy.
Yes.
And I would go drinking with my philosophy professors, and we get drunk and talk philosophy. And I thought, I can do this. This is really fun. And then they'd go to Cancun, Mexico for the summer. And I thought, I can do that. But I kept meeting all these PhDs in philosophy that couldn't get a job. Again, I didn't know it was a bad economic time, but I really loved philosophy because philosophy is very logical.
Yeah.
You know, you have to take a lot of logic classes to get a philosophy degree. And I think I kind of look like a philosopher.
Yes.
So then I met these architects that were young architects that were making money. They probably had some kind of government contract, and they were driving Porsches. And I thought, well, I'm English.
Yeah.
I like old buildings, and I could drive a Porsche. So I went into architectural school.
Right.
And the first semester, I got 4 Ds and an F, and I hated it. I thought, why would anybody want to do this? This is horrible, you know? And, you know, obviously I was learning a big lesson, you know, what's the reason you're doing something? Is it because you're thinking of the things it's going to give you, like money, prestige, Porsche? Or are you thinking about what it's going to be on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, moment-to-moment basis?
Brilliant.
Big thing to learn.
Yes.
So then I went to my college counselor and I said, okay, this is what I've done. What do I do?
Yeah.
And he said, what subject do you make the best grades in? And I said, math. He said, why don't you go and be an accountant? I didn't even know what an accountant was.
No.
I never, you know, an accountant had never crossed my path. The only question I asked was, well, can I get a job?
Yes.
And he said, oh yeah, accountants always get jobs. To this day, I don't know if that was a joke.
Right.
Because he sent me to the most conservative profession in America. And at the time, I looked like this.
Yeah.
Which did not
look like
is not the way anybody else in the accounting college or the business college looked.
No.
There was another guy that drove a Harley, and he had kind of long hair. And he and I used to sit in the back of the classes, and every once in a while we'd look at each other and go, what are we doing here? But when I went to class and I looked at it, I immediately was able to say, wow, big picture, this is a perfect math problem. No matter what you do, it works. And I thought to myself, okay, so they're going to pay me a bunch of money to just play with this perfect math problem. I can do that.
That's right.
And so that's the sad story of how I became a CPA, or the same as a chartered accountant. And
that's great. That leads us on to 21 to 30, an important story in your life between 21 and 30.
Okay, well, the biggest important story at that time was, so I got out, I worked for a family business for 2 years, and it was obvious it wasn't going to be able to pay for all the families that were working in it. So I decided to apply for an accounting job in a junior college located in the Rocky Mountains. It had 2 campuses in the mountains and 8 community ed locations. And I would, if I got the position, I would be the only accountant for the college. They had centralized accounting, and I would put together all of the financial statements for the college and for the independent CPA auditors that came in every year. And it would be a big deal. So I went there and I got the job. And I'm like, wow. I mean, it was at that time, it was in the mountains. It was a small town, but my office was located where all the department heads were.
Yeah.
So I could have intelligent conversations with some very intelligent people. So I got the best of both worlds.
Right.
But the guy that hired me said, you don't really qualify for this job, but I'm going to mentor you for a year and you'll do great. And so I started working, and, you know, I'm living in paradise. I mean, I could walk to my office. There was a huge Olympic-sized hot springs pool. I went every lunch and swam. It was such a cool town. Everybody left their keys in the car,
Right.
in the ignition,
Yeah.
you know, and in 5 minutes I could be up on a mesa and be sitting in the middle of a field where deer and elk and bald eagles were flying around, and I wouldn't see another person for all day, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't believe, and they let me have my beard.
Right.
And they told me not to wear a tie and suit because you won't the students won't relate with you. And I'm like, this is perfect. You know, I can't believe I've done this.
Yeah.
2 months later, a new president comes in and fires the guy that hired me and wants to get rid of everybody he ever hired,
Jeez.
including me.
Yeah.
So this was 2 months into my apprenticeship or mentorship from him, and he's gone.
Yeah.
And so I had 5 accounting clerks under me. They were basically told they didn't have to support me.
Right.
And the person that replaced the guy that hired me didn't support me.
No.
Because I mean, nothing was in writing, but it was pretty much known that the president was not going to have the person above or the people below me support me. And then there was, in 5 months, there was going to be the outside independent auditors come in, and he was hoping it would be a mess and he could fire me.
Right.
Because he had to have cause.
Of course. Yeah.
So I'm stuck with a decision to make.
Yeah.
Do I stay or do I go?
Yeah.
Do I leave? Do I quit? And I thought about it for a long time. I could quit, and I could justify to any other place that I went to try and get a job. Well, a new president came in and he wanted to bring his own people in, and he wanted to get rid of everybody else. So what chance would I have of staying there and not being fired? And I felt like that would be a way I could get out of it. And it wasn't my fault.
Yes.
It really had nothing to do with me. Or I could stay. I'm 25 years old and I'm going against the president of a junior college. And I've already been told I'm not qualified. So I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
I have no support. And I'm faced with this decision. So I decided to stay.
Yes, I thought so.
And I had all of my college accounting books. I read them all over again.
Yeah.
I took 20 years of CPA or chartered accountant tests to see if in all of that stuff, there was something I wasn't aware of, because
Right.
I know that I'm in a place where I don't know what I don't know. Maybe I can find it there. Didn't find anything. Worked my tail off during those 5 months, trying to get everything perfect. And I just did the best I could, but I worked sometimes in the evenings and sometimes at night. Anyway, the 5 months went by. The auditors came in, they did the audit. They gave me no indication of how it was going or anything. And so they finished, and I'm in a conference room with the president, the snake in the grass that's above me, and the auditors. And the president says to the head auditor, "How did the audit go?" And the head auditor said, "Great, Nigel did a fantastic job. The books are cleaner than they've been in years." He said, "Thank you," got up out of his chair and walked out of the room.
Yeah.
And I went, yeah, I won. But it really taught me a lot of things.
Yes.
And I've used that throughout my career, and I still use it.
Yes.
Number one, why did I make that decision where the odds were greatly against me? Well, I remember some of the things that I'd learned when I was in the English Boy Scouts when I lived in England.
Right.
We had some really good troop leaders, and they were role models.
Yeah.
And one of they really taught us a lot of things to live by.
Yeah.
Like always do the right thing, be honest, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought about the two options and I said, this just isn't right.
Right.
It isn't right that I have to quit because this new president comes in. I didn't do anything wrong. I was already here.
Yeah.
Why should I have to leave? It's not right. And I felt like it was right against wrong.
Sure.
And so that was a big reason that I stayed.
Yeah.
And I still to this day believe good triumphs over evil.
Yes.
But another reason that I made that decision was I thought to myself, how am I going to think about myself in the future, depending on which choice I make? And I thought about, if I quit and I just go forward, how am I going to feel about myself?
Yeah.
And then how am I going to feel about myself if I go forward and stay, even if I get fired? Because if I got fired because the audit was bad, then it is my fault.
Yes.
As opposed to the other one is not my fault.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd rather try with everything I can to do the right thing. Even if I fail, I'm still going to feel better about myself than if I quit.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And the other thing that, a lot of people, like right now, I'm a business coach, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are saying to their clients, what's your why?
Yeah.
What's your why, right? I think there's things before that.
Right.
So I say to my clients, who are you? What makes you you? What makes you make the decisions you make? I learned a lot about that in that experience.
Yes.
And then what's important to you? And that's another thing that I really learned in that situation. What's really important to me? And then why is that important to me?
Where do you think, which father do you think you got that from, Nigel?
I don't know if I got it from
Right.
my father, because I didn't really, my American, I don't remember anything about my
I understand that, but
grandfather.
I wondered if you think now it might have been in your genes anyway, because he was a banker, probably worked hard, or whether it
I think they were both strong men,
Right.
but the American one, he and I were very different.
Yes.
He he was a mechanic.
Right.
So his mindset was if he couldn't see it or touch it, it didn't exist.
Ah.
And on his deathbed, he told my mother, I'm concerned about Nigel because he's always got his head in the clouds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was always in my head, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I wasn't touching or seeing something, but they were very strong people.
Of course.
I don't know.
No.
But the point for me was it was there.
Yeah.
Because afterwards I went, wow, that was a courageous thing to do.
And so let's go on, Nigel. Then it's 31 to 40.
31 to 40. Let's see. Well, that was a lot of that was I was working for other people.
Yeah.
And as an accountant, I worked since I did win at the junior college. I stayed there for another 2 years, and they brought in a controller above me, and it was very, very different, very harmonious at that time. Then I went back to Denver and I worked for real estate development companies, and I was an accountant and a controller for those kind of, I put together budgets for high-rise office buildings and stuff like that. And I always felt like I didn't fit in being an employee.
Yes.
Because I always would think to myself, and sometimes I would even speak it and say, why do we do it this way?
That's right.
Because I could see several ways that would be a lot more efficient and effective. But I learned that that's not a very good question to ask if you're an employee.
Right.
That's really frowned on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then I went to, when I left Glenwood, the junior college, I came back to Denver and I worked for a county for 6 months.
Yeah.
Because I understood governmental accounting and everything. That was the last time in my career that I was bored.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I was so bored. I mean, what they gave me to do in a week, I could do in a morning if I really slowed down. Yeah. And I was so bored. And I thought, I have got to get away from this as far as I can.
Yeah.
So then I went to work for real estate development companies that were more entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
But I still was an employee. Yeah. And then I transferred into starting my own company.
We'll come into that, Nigel. Before we come into that, the question that's come into my mind is, say, late 20s, 30s, socially, were you still into music? Were you meeting people still outside of work?
Yeah. I mean, I was married when I was at the junior college. When I came back, we got divorced because we lost one of our daughters to a freak accident, and I wasn't there, she was, and a lot of things happened. So then I was dating again.
Right.
So it was a fun time to be dating, and in Denver there was a lot of things going on. So yeah, I really had fun, 20s to 30s. And then that was also the time that I started my own business. So I think I was growing or evolving with every part of my world.
Yes.
So, really understanding who I was much more.
Are we into the 40s yet, or are we still in the late 30s when you started your own business?
Let's see. Yeah, I was I was like 34 when I started my
Right.
own business.
Right. Yeah. A pretty important
And
decision.
yeah, I mean, I really started it because I had worked for all these other people and they made a bunch of money. I didn't really enjoy my job that much. I mean, I knew what I was doing. I
Yeah.
mean, I really enjoyed it at the junior college,
Yeah.
but after that, I really didn't enjoy it. And I started my own practice to give myself time to decide what I wanted to do next. I thought about becoming a chiropractor,
Yeah.
but the only place I could get trained was Iowa.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you know Iowa, but it's very flat and there's
That's right.
nothing going on. And I thought, 3 years in Iowa, I don't think I can do that. So, but something happened once I started my business. That was the first time I had direct communication and input or impact on my own clients.
Yes.
And that totally changed
Yeah.
everything because for the first time, I had the ability to help these small business because all my clients were small entrepreneurial business
Yes.
owners, typically 50 or less employees. I could help them understand what was going on in their business.
Yeah.
I could help put a plan for them to get to where they wanted to be. I totally changed the purpose of my firm from, creating documents for compliance purposes to helping my clients get to where they wanted to go.
That reminds me, right back when we first started talking, you said you're a people person. You were when you were young. You watched people. You're interested in how people acted, and now you've sort of come right back to working with people again, rather than working with the corporations. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never really worked for corporations, but yeah,
But you know what I
I
mean?
was more interested in helping them get to where they wanted to
Yeah.
than being the best accountant,
Yes.
But another thing I learned about myself, and I think I learned about humans, is I think we can be in harmony with our left and our right brain.
Right.
And, even though accounting is very left brain, it's very logical and all of that kind of thing. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle getting to figure it out. But I also like the right side of the brain, helping people get through
Yeah.
the intangible things that get in their way as well. And that's why 20 years ago, somehow I found myself in coaching classes because I could help my clients with the tangible, but I could see I'd put a plan together and they'd only go so far and then they'd stop.
Yeah.
And I'd go, what's going on? And I realized I put a plan for the business to evolve, but not for the business owner to evolve.
Right.
And so that also changed my company's purpose.
Yes.
It's whatever they need to get to whatever they want to get to.
Right.
So I started doing both of them 20 years ago, and I just sold my CPA practice December of 2020.
Yes.
So now I'm just doing the coaching and mentoring, and it's a combination of both. Because also 20 years ago, I wrote a book entitled "From Egopreneur to Ultrapreneur," which is my perception on how the entrepreneurial world works, which is not what you would think an accountant would put together.
No.
And so the combination of those, and I didn't do it because I wanted to write a book. When I started working with my clients and they were trying to get somewhere and they get stuck, And I'd say, well, how are you looking at this? And they tell me it. And so many times I'd say, no, look at it this way.
Yeah.
Well, the first time I said, look at it this way was the first time I was conscious that I was looking at it that way.
Right. Right.
But it was obvious to me when I said that I had been looking at it that way for a long time. But when I'd say that, they'd say, I don't know what you're talking about, Nigel. It doesn't make any sense what you're saying. And eventually they said, write a book. We need something to refer to. Yeah. And I resisted for a year and a half, but then I started to write it and I realized why they couldn't understand. Because by the time I was saying, look at it like this, I was kind of like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, where he can move things around on that see-through screen. And so they were just going like this. Oh, what are you talking about? Yeah. So I had to take it apart and put it into a book, and I'm still using that, and it's just expanded since I wrote. You haven't got a
copy there, have you, Nigel?
Yeah, I do.
Can you hold it up to the screen?
Yeah. I did yesterday.
Okay.
I was holding it up yesterday. There it is.
Well, my guy will cut all this out. So there's the book. And
look at that amazing artwork.
And again, people would say that that's not the sort of artwork an accountant would use.
No, and what I wanted to say by this, I mean, I just did this myself, but what I wanted to say by making that the cover is that what I'm putting in the book is really simple.
Yes.
It's really simple. And sometimes when people come to my free intro that I do on a monthly basis, it's so simple, their rational mind goes, okay, I get that. There's not much to that. Okay. No. But there's so much to it. It typically takes people years before they really comprehend what it's all about.
Yes.
It's kind of like, you know, we kind of think that things that are subtle or small aren't powerful.
Right.
But, you know, when's the last time you saw an atom?
Yeah. Yeah.
But look what they can do.
I often talk to people about presentations, Nigel, and I say, it's not the big thing that goes wrong that will kill you. You know, if you're doing a presentation and the screen just goes blank, that can be acceptable. People won't have a go at you for it. But if you make a little, you know, if you don't provide the pens and paper, or if you don't provide a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, then to many people, that's worse than the screen going. It's the little things that you haven't thought about, the lack of planning, that really kills you often.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story, a quick story, that when I did my first public speaking presentation, and it was about a tax law that had just been passed. And it was so long ago, we were using overhead projectors.
Right.
You know, with the sheets of paper that were kind of like plastic.
Yeah.
Well, I had all of my notes on these sheets, and I had them all piled up, you know, next to the overhead projector. And there were all these people in the audience that were seasoned tax people. They weren't accountants or anything, but they knew about taxes. And I was the first presenter, and then there was a financial planner, and then there was an attorney. We're in this big room at the financial planners building. And so I started talking, and all these eyes are just looking at me, and they're very serious, you know, and I'm just, you know, nervous as hell. After like the third sheet,
yes,
I knocked my water over on the rest of them.
Right.
And if you remember what happens, it just, and I'm just like, I didn't know what to do. I'm just like, beam me up, Scotty, kind of thing. And I'm just standing there, and it seemed like an eternity. It was probably less than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But the financial planner could see I was, really freaking out. And he said, really loud, he said, "So Nigel, I guess we're going to hear the watered down version today." And just like you, everybody laughed,
Yeah.
and I laughed too. And I said, yeah, I don't know this tax bill that well. That's why I have all these notes. I'll do the best I can, but
yeah,
I made a mess of this, and I got through it.
Right.
But it really, the lesson there was, there's a lot of power in humor.
Right. Absolutely. So where are we now, Nigel? How old are you now? You're in your 50s?
Now?
Yeah.
Currently?
Yeah.
In less than 2 months, I'll be 70.
Oh, God. You've got a lot of years to do then. So 50 to 60, Nigel, or 50 to 60 has got to be when your business is taking off, is it?
Yeah. I mean, I went from when I started my own practice, it was me. I did everything. I went to my clients' businesses, picked up stuff, dropped them off.
Yeah.
I did bookkeeping. I did accounting. I did tax prep.
Yeah.
I even typed the tax returns on a typewriter.
Yes.
That's where I started. And I got to where I had, at one point, 15 employees. Yeah. And a lot of them were CPAs.
Right.
So at one point I was really making a lot of money. I was rocking and rolling. Yeah. But it took a lot from me. Yes. I mean, I in 2006, I got cancer, I got shingles, I got my stomach partially paralyzed from taking painkillers. Yes. And that's when I really decided I'm going to reduce the number of clients I have and start increasing the coaching clients. Right. Because they're very opposite ends of the spectrum as far as businesses. Yes. Being an accountant, I'm a necessary evil. Yeah. People wouldn't come to me unless they were forced to by the government or the banks or whatever. But nobody forces people to be coached or mentored. And they're always happy that you're helping them. Yeah. Whereas nobody gets up in the morning and says, I can't wait to go to see my accountant, Yeah, no. But I mean, I think I really felt good about what I had done. Yeah. But as the years went on, there became more and more regulations, more and more things that I became responsible for. Right. Like by the time I sold my practice, which was 31 years of having it, a lot of things that I was doing was the responsibility of the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, when I started. Yeah. So much got pushed over to the tax preparer, and then the regulations had penalties, and the penalties weren't necessarily for incompetence. They could be for a mistake, like not checking a box. Right. But some of those penalties were $5,000 and $10,000 per occurrence. Yes. Which kind of took all the fun out of it. Yeah. 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 So I learned a lot about myself. I really learned a lot about all the different businesses, so that when I was helping my clients, I really felt like I had a wealth of knowledge. Yeah. And after a while, a wealth of experience, so I could really help people. And that's that's where I got my fulfillment. So,
well, we're coming towards we've got time yet, Nigel. We're coming towards the end. Can you tell us a little bit more about the coaching that you do now? And also, if you can tell us about the house you live in, and I know you've got a wonderful partner. So if you could just bring us towards the end from there.
Well, where I live now, this is where I live. We've been in this house since 1999.
Right.
The house is 95 years old.
Wow.
It's all brick. There are Victorian houses on the other side of the street. When we moved in here in 99, every one of the houses in our neighborhood was brick.
Yes.
Different eras. Like I've got some across the street also that were built in probably the 50s and 60s, but they're all brick.
Yeah.
It's on a hill. So the north side is 1 story. The south side is 2 story.
Right.
But I can look out of my kitchen window, which is on the south side, and I can see Pikes Peak, which is 75 miles away.
Right. Wow.
So until they sell the house behind us and somebody builds this big thing and blocks my view. But it's a wonderful place. It reminds me of England because there's big trees and all the brick houses and my partner and I have been together since 1997.
Yes.
And when I went out on my own, she said, well, I'll help you get it established, but I'm only going to stay for 6 months because I think it's going to ruin our relationship.
Yeah.
And she worked with me for 20 years. In 2010, I took the bookkeeping and accounting out of my CPA firm, because when I sold my CPA firm, I just sold the taxes. And she's been doing that by herself ever since. And she's working with some of the same clients that I have. And she's doing a wonderful job.
No, I mean, if anything comes from this, Nigel, I recommend that people not only connect with you for what you're doing now, the coaching, but I think the connection you've got with your partner. So I should remember her name, but it's
Susan.
Susan, that's it. The connection you and Susan have got shines through when you do your presentations. I'm going to go right back to something that you said, Nigel, that interests me. You broke your back in was it a motorcycling accident?
Yeah.
What disabilities have you, if any, has it left you with?
Well, I have pain in my back pretty much every day.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better, but it was in my lower lumbar. So, it's kind of hard not to move. And,
right.
I don't think I've missed out on anything.
No, that's what I'm thinking, Yeah.
And sometimes when it really hurts and I feel sorry for myself, I think, well, there's a lot of people that go through a lot worse things than you're going through. So buck up, Buttercup.
Yeah. And see, that's the sort of attitude that you had when you were at that college. So it's lasted with you, I think. Yeah. You've still got it now, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it stopped me from doing anything I wanted to do.
And can you tell me if you've got a big picture, say, where you're going on from here, 2, 3, 4, 5 years time?
Well, I'm continuing to coach and mentor people. You asked me what was the difference between my coaching, and basically what I realized with my clients is the reason they had such a hard time and they would stop is because they were basically trained all their life to be a follower.
Yeah.
Somebody was there telling them what to do, when to do, and how to do it.
Yes.
Now, all of a sudden, they were the ones that had to make those decisions, and they weren't prepared for it.
Right.
And there's a lot of people, a lot of coaches that are, I'll help you and I'll help you be successful and I'll turn you into a leader. But what they do is they train them with a one-size-fits-all linear process that guarantees they're going to remain a follower.
Right.
And they keep them accountable. So you're still like in school being trained to be a follower. So I realized that. And, again, to me, all the experiences that I've gone through and how I reacted and why I reacted the way I did helped me understand who I was, what was important to me and why. So I help people with that. I don't tell them what to do.
No.
I don't keep them accountable. But I give them a framework where they get to decide what they put in the framework, but I show them how this very simple framework works by helping them get on track and stay on track with what they really want. In other words, staying authentic or true to themselves.
Right.
Because especially in the entrepreneurial world, if you want to be successful, the biggest thing you need to know is you.
Yes.
And the more you do things that are authentically you, the more success you're going to have. It's when people try to fit into a box that somebody said, this is the way you have to do it.
Yeah.
And it's all uncomfortable and they don't feel positive, powerful, and productive, that they fail.
Well, I think I understand that, Nigel, because the work that I've succeeded in has been when I was a reasonably successful football coach, soccer coach. I love soccer. I was a reasonably successful supply teacher with no training because I loved being in front of class. And I loved being a sports therapist because, again, it was what I enjoyed doing. And then I went through a really deep and dark patch where I was trying to figure out what I could do as my business started to flatline. And then I started storytelling. And it's the happiest I've been for many, many years. And it's just because I've got that love of stories, and I've still got that love of being in front of people. It's not like work anymore.
No. Stories have always been fantastic for me too. I mean, I remember the first time I was told a story in school, it was like, wow.
Yeah.
Very, very wonderful.
So thanks very much, Nigel. And I hope to speak to you again. Take care.
Thank you.